Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 133.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I am your host, Jay Massey, and I am absolutely excited because you guys have heard me say a number of times, and I'm going to say it one more time, just in case you haven't. You do not have a money problem. You have an idea problem, and many of us could solve our money problem if we were willing to gain access to other people's ideas and then just flat, plain execute on them. Today's guest has done exactly that. It's not about how much money you have. It's how you use what you have to get what you need so you can have what you want. And he's done that. And that's what's amazing about today's guest. Because, hear this, with only $500 in capital, he was able to build a brand that you already know. Have you seen those boots? You know, UGG. Yeah, that's who we're talking to today. None other than Brian Smith, the founder of the world-famous UGG Australian brand. He graduated in 1978 as a chartered accountant in Australia and came to California. I call that a good move because I love the weather out here, looking for the next big opportunity to bring back to Australia. He's recently authored a book, The Birth of a Brand, that is now live in Amazon and is a sought-after keynote speaker and mentors small business owners. So I know something today. You're going to see the power of one idea. Welcome, Brian Smith. Brian, you there?
Hey, Jay. Nice to be on your show. Thank you.
You are quite welcome, and I am glad that you have taken the time to be here. Now, as the audience knows, you may not know, we tend to start with the same question because I got to know. I look at, today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. Batman, Robin, and I don't know if Australians had a special
I could live up to that
superhero or anything, but I think we do live up to that as entrepreneurs. I think that's what we do. We put on, our superhero pants and tights and whatever, and we go out there and we take on other people's problems. That's what superheroes do. I mean, if I'm in a burning building, I probably want Spider-Man to come by, and at least if I have to jump, I want him to, spread a web so that I can land on it. That would be very, very great. I'd be very happy for that. Now, before Spider-Man was Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman was what she was. Here's the point. They all have an origin. They all started somewhere. Maybe they got bit by a spider, or maybe they got some, their planet exploded. But my question to you is, before you were the founder of UGG, what I would love to know is, who is Brian Smith?
Okay. Well, let's go all the way back then. I was working as an accountant in Australia, and I really didn't like it. But I didn't get an education pass at my high school to go to college, so I had to find a job in the meantime. And accounting was it, and I thought I could graduate in 4 years by going to night school. Well, that took 10 years, and the day I graduated is the day I quit being an accountant. I gave my notice. And it was quite a while, a month or two, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I had just opened the new album, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. I'm sure you've heard of that.
I have.
And the words in it were that I heard were, tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long and there is time to kill today. And I thought, oh, my God, he's talking about me. And then it went on. But then you find one day 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And I just got goosebumps. And I thought, oh, my God, that I've missed the starting gun. All my friends are they're tracking to partnerships or whatever, started their own businesses, and I'd done nothing for 10 years. So just within a couple of days, I was meditating and figured out, all the trends are coming from California, waterbeds, Levi jeans, surf clothing brands, all that stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to go to California and find the next big thing to bring back. And I was in California for maybe 2-3 months, still hadn't found it until I was, going to go surfing up at Malibu one day. And my buddy was down. He brought a copy of the new Surfer magazine, and I flicked through it, and I got goosebumps again because I saw a photo of these pairs of legs up in front of a fireplace with sheepskin boots on, and I went, oh my God, there's no sheepskin boots in America. And it seemed like 1 in 2 Australians owned a pair at that time. So that's the answer of how I got here and how I started the UGG boot business was by seeing that ad. And a buddy of mine and I borrowed $500, which was our first capital, and we sent down for some samples. So that's who I was. I was never trained as an entrepreneur. I never really had any ideas to be one. I just acted out of default because I didn't want to be an accountant.
You hated it that much, so you decided to build a multi-million-dollar international enterprise instead.
I thought it would be overnight, yeah.
Oh, well, it only takes about, 17 years to be overnight success?
Yeah. My problem was that it takes a certain amount of ignorance or innocence to become to be a good entrepreneur, because if you knew all the obstacles ahead of you, you would never start. And so I was ignorant that Americans don't get sheepskin like Australians do. They think it's delicate and you can't get it wet, you can't get it muddy, it's going to be hot, it's going to be, prickly. And whereas Australians just know how rugged and comfortable it is, and it always keeps your foot at foot temperature. So the first few road trips I did to the shoe stores got zero response. It's California. They're going, why are you trying to bring sheepskin here? It never gets cold.
Right.
But it never got cold in Australia either. So I went to a shoe show in New York thinking maybe they'll have a different attitude. And in 3 days at this little trade show I was at, not a single person spoke to me. I may as well have had car parts or meat or something on the table because they just didn't get it. But on the way home in the plane, I was thinking, well, how come all my California friends know about it? And it struck me that they were all surfers. And all the California guys who went to Australia surfing brought 3 or 4 pairs of these sheepskin boots back for their buddies. So it was really well known in that market. So we just changed tactics on our marketing and decided to go after the surf shops.
Which obviously doesn't seem like that. No one would have ever put those two together.
Yeah,
so you just take the information that you're given and start, and I think that's one of the fundamental concepts of being an entrepreneur is you have a plan. We all have this. They say write a business plan. I'm guessing you didn't have one.
No, God, and if I had I would have realized I needed $200,000 or $300,000 to start. So that. Nobody would know about UGG boots today if I had done a business plan.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I find these things interesting is that sometimes we get ourselves in this situation, or there are individuals who feel like, I can't start until I see the entire process, until I know what's going to happen from day 1 to day 2 to day 3. Yeah. I can't take the first step. Yet I find so many entrepreneurs have way more success by going as far as they can see today and trusting that when they get there, they'll be able to see further.
Yeah, that's so true. Too much thinking leads to paralysis. Exactly what you described. I've seen it so many times.
So let me ask you this then. I like how you mentioned it's ignorance or innocence. It's one of the two, and probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
But because I can totally understand. You're like, man, I don't know if I want to. Knowing what I know today, would I still start what we've done? That's a really, really good question,
Yeah. But the good news is that once you start out on a path, the universe just sort of conspires to work with you. I use this little analogy. You never see an advertisement for a refrigerator, right? until you want to buy a refrigerator, and then every single newspaper and every single piece of thing you look at has ads for newspapers. And that's what it's like with a business when you're starting out. You don't know what's out there, but the minute you start, all these things will start to come into your perception that has always been there, but it's never until you put the focus on it. Like, what do I need to do to learn about customs brokers because I'm going to bring sheepskin boots to California, right? I'd never even heard of customs brokers, but the universe just supplies the information that you need as you go. So you could be thinking of a real estate deal or a new product that you want to do or a service. You might want to start a new religion, and how do you get the first followers? You just got to start. If you don't start, you'll never get anywhere.
Well, and that brings us to a very important question, because I know, especially with a lot of real estate or business owners, the first time when we write that business plan or we have a problem that we think we can solve or a product that we believe other people want, we think we actually know who wants it, but yet we have no clue. So what was the process like to figure that out, that, hey, this is the person we should be going after if we're going to really build something large?
Let me tell you a story about that, because, I figured out the surf shops, right? So I took the samples around and they were all going, oh, my God, you're going to be a millionaire. Yeah, those are great. All my friends have got them, And so we borrowed nearly $20,000 for our first capital and bought 500 pairs of boots in. And when they arrived, Doug and I, my buddy, we went out on the road again with all of the product, and we went back to exactly the same shops who told us how rich we were going to be. And they all said, oh, they're great, but we couldn't sell them out of our store because we just sell surfboards and shorts and sandals and over and over and over again. So our first year's sales was 28 pairs. And it was exactly $1,000. But the thing is, you can't get to $1 billion, which it is now, without that first 1,000. So you have to start somewhere. And for like 3 years, we ended up going to the swap meets, and if I went surfing up at Malibu, I'd open up the back of the van, and I had a ton of customers used to come just from the word of mouth and buy product out of the van. But the first year after that was $30,000. And we started advertising in Surfer Magazine and getting these really expensive models and putting them on the beach with perfect hair and perfect clothing and perfect UGG boots. And sales $30,000. And the next year we got more expensive models and more expensive photographers, and made them look really pretty on the rocks at the beach, and $30,000. And I was in Chicago, because I felt like such a failure I couldn't get into the mall stores. And it was at the buying office of Montgomery Ward, which was a big shoe retailer back then. And I gave the best sales pitch I'd ever given, and he just sort of sat back and looked at me and was silent for a while. And then he said, Brian, we're the elephants. Don't you get it? We don't move till the mice are running around under our feet. And I instantly got what he meant, which was that until I got the specialty stores all, going crazy for it, the mall stores were so risk averse, they were never going to order. So I got back to California and had a beer with one of my buddies who owned a surf shop one night, and he called out to the back of the room and said, hey, you guys, all these little 12, 13-year-old grommets were back there, and what do you guys think of UGG boots? And they came out, and one after the other said, they were saying, oh, those UGG boots, they're so fake, man. Have you seen those ads? Those models can't surf. And I was hit again like this goosebumps thing, I said, oh, my God, I'm sending the wrong image to my market. And so within a couple of days, I found these young pro surfers that I started sponsoring. And I just used my own camera, followed them to the beach when they were going surfing, wearing their UGG boots and stuff, and just ran these sort of tacky ads, but they were real, classic surf spots. All these surfers would recognize the spots we were photographing. And we ran those ads this season, and the sales jumped to $250,000 just purely because of capturing the right image. And so it's another classic example of just hanging on until you figure out what the universe is sending. And when I made that connection, bam, it took it to a whole new level.
Well, you bring up an interesting point with that is many times we haven't, like you said, we have an idea. We want to go out there. We want to see it succeed immediately. It's only going to go up, right? Everybody wants this. How do you handle going from that emotional high to 28 pairs?
Well, I've learned, in my book, I quote this classic piece of philosophy: the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is to live every day happily as a tadpole. And bit by bit, you keep doing the right thing, keep doing what you think is best for the brand, keep trying to push it, whatever it is you're doing, keep pushing. And before you know it, it'll be, you'll find that one link that just launches you. That's like becoming the frog,
Yeah. And so the interesting thing you're really saying, just keep failing forward in a very painful way is what you're saying.
Yeah, but be happy about it.
That's the book right there. Failing forward and still smiling.
Yeah, because it's just, you can't. I've got the whole theme of my book is what I've discovered in business, which is you can't give birth to adults. Every business is conceived by somebody. They have an idea. It doesn't matter if it's a product or a new movie or a religion or a sandwich shop. It doesn't matter. Someone conceives the idea, then they do the first action, and that gives birth. For my birth, it was buying those 6 pairs of samples from Australia. And then every business goes into this horrible infancy, and it just seems to lie there. And no matter what you do, it was like me with my 30,000, right? It just will not get up and go to college. And there's no matter shaking the cradle or overfeeding can make that baby get up and go to college. It has to be an infant. But then it'll hit the toddling stage, which is cool because, people start to get interested and people take notice of your product or your service. And then eventually you'll hit youth, which is when all this, the sales are consistent, the orders are coming in, the shipping's happening, the accounting's good. And that's like a kid who can put his own pajamas on and eat at the table, without any effort. And if it's a really good product, it'll hit the teenage years, which, like when UGG went crazy, it just went out of control there for a while, just like every teenager. And I almost lost control of the business a couple of times during that phase. But ultimately, the administrators and the managers start to put the controls in, and it becomes a mature business. But that's just the way every single business starts and ends.
That's such a great analogy because it sets the proper expectation for every entrepreneur when, hey, I'm going to start the new year. I'm going to start next month. I'm going to start this week, this brand new thing. And 2 months from now, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah, exactly. I can't tell you how many people come up to me after I've given a speech, on stage, and they'll come up to me almost in tears going, "Thank you, Brian. I thought I was failing, but now I just see that I'm stuck in this infancy period or I'm just at the toddling stage," or, and they really, really get that analogy, and it gives them so much hope.
Yeah, well, you got to give us something because right now we're not getting the sales, right? So we're looking for hope somewhere. Now, one of the interesting things that I find, specifically as it relates to building a large business, is that you're building something that's larger than you.
Yeah.
What is that process of growing to that point? Because at first, it's just you and a couple of friends selling stuff out of the backseat of, and then all of a sudden you realize we got to hire somebody. What was that like?
That's always a problem in a small business, especially if it started without seed capital or proper capital, because you can never afford to do it, but you can't afford not to.
Right.
And I remember hiring our first salesman who he was more of a marketing guy. And back then he wanted $4,000 a month, and that was huge amount of money back then for us who had nothing, but we just believed that he could take it and change the image of the company. And he did, and we could only afford him for about 6 months, for the season, and he took our sales. He started off the ski industry and introduced like a lot of sexiness into the ads, and it was a catalyst that made the ski industry really attractive, and that was a huge jump forward. But we couldn't afford him through the summertime because being sheepskin, we only had a 3-month selling window,
right?
And so it was very difficult to keep people on all year round. Most businesses aren't like that. They could bring on somebody that with a consistent sales, they can afford to keep people on. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's no time where you can really afford to bring on new people. But again, you can't afford not to, because if you lose your health by working till 10 o'clock or midnight every night and doing all the details when somebody else could be doing it for $20-30 an hour, you're working against yourself.
Indeed. And that's one of the fundamental concepts I often tell people. If it's not worth, like for myself personally, I say, if this is not $1,000 an hour activity, I personally don't need to be doing it. Yeah. Someone else does, which makes it, which the first time you do that, it really clears your calendar because you got nothing else to do, because you realize just how many of those small little things that you're doing that you probably shouldn't be. Now, in the process, especially for me, I remember the first time I brought on an executive assistant, I was, scared. I'm like, how on earth am I going to feed them too?
Right.
But at some point you kind of get used to it, but then you have to learn that there's actually a process to vetting and finding the right persons. So I guess the question becomes is, how do you do that? How do you know that the person that you are looking at, because some might say that you were very fortunate to find the salesperson that worked out.
Right.
But was he the first one or the 101st one that you tried? And what did you learn in the process so that you could narrow that down to find the right person faster?
Are you tired of letting good cash flow generating ideas go to waste? Go to cashflowdiary.com/ready to apply for a complimentary, yes, that means free, one-on-one breakthrough session. Take action now. Go to cashflowdiary.com/ready. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/ready. Before we get back to today's episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, your host, Jay Massey, has some important insights to share with you.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Do you give up too soon? I mean, as you continue to listen to the story here, ask yourself, would you have persevered? At what point would you have quit? When would you have checked out? Where would you have let go and said, it's just too hard, too difficult, can't be done. Oh, well, I guess nobody really, really, really wants sheepskin boots. Keep that in mind as you continue to listen to the rest.
Well, in this case, it was the first one.
Awesome.
We learned quickly that he wasn't the sort of guy that we could afford with the business, being as seasonal as it was. But eventually, we were able to bring in a bunch of sales reps who were free, but they earned a commission. And so that was, and we wouldn't have known that had we not gone the other route first. So it's a sort of a learning thing that you go through. But one thing that I can talk about with, 20, 30 years of experience in business now is that you've got to just give it your best shot. And I believe a lot in intuition. In fact, my wife used to always have this incredible intuition about people I would hire. She would know if they're good or bad, and I would usually override her, but she was always right. But you just got to go with your gut. But here's the hard part, but it's the most necessary part. If it's not working out within a month or two, you must be strong enough to tell them that, hey, it's not working, and move on, which again means don't sign a long-term contract with somebody. You always need a testing period.
Indeed. In fact, I can echo that sentiment, having made that same mistake. I'm curious, for me, I know for me, I learned that by having to deal with individuals longer than I should have.
Right.
Is that I'm assuming that that was a similar
Yeah.
instance for you? Yeah.
Oh, over and over again. Yeah. And that's why I said it's with 20 or 30 years experience. For the first 10 years, I didn't learn the lesson. Even though my wife was beating me over the head, I didn't learn the lesson. But now it's a case of you have to be sort of ruthless and know that your business comes first.
You know, what's funny about that is I often tell people that I will bring my wife to certain meetings for not necessarily for her business input, although that's valued. It's, hey, just tell me how you feel about this person.
Yeah.
And I do that all the time. And I have learned very, very painfully to listen to what I call the willies. Every time she gets to the willies, she's like, I just don't like you. Can you tell me why? Nope, just don't feel good. All right, great. And I've learned to listen no matter the cost, because
you have to. It's wisdom. It's wisdom that they have that guys just don't.
Yeah, what is that? That's like so not fair. It's just so not fair. Now,
well, we can throw a football there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's truly that makes up for it. The one of the interesting things that I do find about business, though, and especially would-be entrepreneurs, is that we let minor things stop them. At the beginning of this episode, I simply said that no one has a money problem, but you might have an idea problem.
Yeah.
From my experience in most businesses that I've run into, there are times where cash is tight. Something happens. You didn't expect this and everything is going smoothly. And then all of a sudden, bam, you've got to figure it out.
Yeah.
What were some of those times for you, and how did you guys come up with the ideas to figure that out?
Well, you can imagine with having 3 months of sales every year and 9 months, the first 3 or 4 years I lived off credit cards in the summer and got, jobs in construction, or, 1 year I was washing boats at Marina del Rey. Another year I was working on a golf course, So they're the tough times when you run out of cash. And as we moved forward and I started getting capital where it could keep me through the summertime, you just have to get creative and try and figure out if there's a way for, like, I started offering big discounts for getting rid of inventory that was left over and stuff like that. So it's hard. It's a hard question to answer when I don't know the type of business that everybody's has out there in your listening audience, but it really comes down to creativity.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when those creative moments come, I guess, was there ever a time in which you decided to bring in additional capital from outside investors to make things work?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Ready for another story?
Yeah, by all means.
Okay, this was a rather desperate period for me, and my book, it's a lot of highs, but it's a lot more lows and how I overcame them, which is normal for every business. Well, I built the business up to a couple of $1 million, but each time, you'd get investors in, they really have the ability to run with you so far. But if the business is doubling like mine was, it was 2 million looking like it was going to be 3.5, 4. They didn't have the ability to stick with it and finance the growth. So we'd end up buying them out. And in this case, I bought in 3 new investors, and we were all going to go 25% each on the business. My quarter was for bringing the business in. And I paid off my old investor. And there was one proviso. I didn't get my 25% till I finished up this little trademark lawsuit that I was in with another company that spelled their name UGHS. And so, I went in and they made me the sales rep for Southern California. Well, right after that transaction happened, the very first day I was out on the road, I went down to Huntington Surf and Sport, and I walked in, and the guy says, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the." What? He said, "Yeah, I just called an order, and they said you don't own it anymore." And I said, "You kidding me? What?" And I couldn't wait to finish. I went next door to the Shell gas station to the phone booth, because this is before cell phones, and I went, called up and said, Neil, what the hell are you telling anybody? He says, well, you don't own the business, Brian. I said, yes, I do. You're my 3 new partners. And they said, no, that's not what the contract says. And I just went straight back home to San Diego and pulled out the contract. And I went, oh, my God, they're right. And I realized I'd given up the company. But I didn't know it until I actually read that. And I went into depression for a couple of days, and wondering if, I'm going to be a business broker or real estate or, start a franchise or what. And it came to me in a meditation that I just love sales, and then I thought, well, okay, what can I sell? And the answer was pretty obvious. I loved UGG boots and I loved the industry and I loved all my retailers. So I just ate humble pie and I just went back as a non-owner and started being the sales rep and hanging out with all the retailers, and fixing up their inventories. And by now they were all becoming friends. So it wasn't like hard selling or anything. And after a month, I got back to the warehouse and Neil handed me a check for $5,000. And he said, that's your commissions for the month. And I went, you're kidding me. I had not drawn a cent out of the business till that time. Wow. And the next month there was a check for $10,000, and the next month another check for $10,000. And I started looking at this going, my God, I haven't done any shipping, any billing, any purchasing, any administration. I've just been out having fun with all my retailers and, delivering products and making sure inventory's correct. And I thought, I'm making all this money. And that led me to a piece of philosophy that's in my book, which is most often your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. Hmm. And if you could imagine how despondent I was at one point to where I'm on this euphoria of being in my business, loving it, and making a ton of money, it was really one of the greatest blessings I had. And by a pure fluke, a couple of years later, I got the business back 100%. So you never know what's in store because the universe has it all planned, and you just got to play your part.
That is. I don't know that many people would have responded the way that you did. I mean, especially after putting in all that work to get it to be something, anything, functioning and breathing entity, and then to realize in such a way that you did something unknowingly. Wow, amazing. So this brings up an interesting point. You got it back, but then you sold it again.
Yeah, I got it back because Neil, this guy, had bought his other 2 partners out, and then he was at a motocross race and had a massive heart attack and died. So I worked with his widow to try and figure out where the business was, and it was the longest 6 months of my life.
Right. And
I was commuting from San Diego to Anaheim 5 days a week. After about 3 weeks, that got too hard, so I got the train up on Mondays and came back on Fridays. I was working so late that I got to know the midnight shift at Bob's Big Boy Diner, and I was chronically sore throat every Friday night when I got home, and next Monday it was just good enough to go back again. And luckily I was an accountant, so I was able to figure out all of the thing, and it turned out that the company had made a loss, and whereas we all thought it was really profitable because we'd bought life insurance policies and new cars and all that, Neil and I did. And anyway, it turned out that the life insurance policy that we took out just before he died paid off, and it was enough for me to buy the business back from his widow. And it was a great deal. We just switched the names on the original contract when they bought it from me. We just changed the names around and did exactly the same terms. So it was a very easy deal. And suddenly I had 100% of the business back.
Wow. Amazing.
Pretty amazing. Yeah.
Amazing. So, and how many years before, how many years has it, you transpire all these things, and then someone approaches you to say, hey, we want to buy it?
Well, that's a really good story too. Remember when I was selling the boots out of the back of the van at Malibu?
Right.
There was another guy called Doug Otto, and he was always a couple of vans up, parking spaces up, and he was selling these triple-decker sandals. They were neoprene thongs with pink and yellow and pink, and they were about 3 inches tall, but just little thong styles. And he ended up building a business called Deckers out of that thing. And he eventually, he licensed a ton of products that he sold. And he eventually got a sandal called Teva. And he took his company public on that Teva sandal. And he had, 20, 30 million bucks in the bank. I don't know how much it was, but it was a lot of money. And I had built the UGG business up to about 15 million. It looked like it could be 20. And it was one of those periods where we'd grown so fast. I really didn't have any idea how to finance it because, when I started out with 100,000 in sales, the manufacturer would cover me. And then when it got to, 2 million, then, there was receivables financing and stuff that would, and the manufacturer would cover me again. But when you get up in the 10, 15 million, they want to know they have security, which means you have to have a huge cash flow and an asset base behind you, which I didn't because we spent so much in the summertime just staying alive. And back then it was all the investment bankers and the regular bankers, every time I take a business plan to them was, UGG's a fad. It won't be around next year. and I could never, this is 15 years after I'd started, they're still saying, yeah, but it's a fad, it's a shoe, it may not be around next year. So I couldn't get traditional financing for it. And it was just, anyway, this season when I had the 15 million in sales, I was going off to a trade show in Atlanta, which is called the Super Show, and it's one of the biggest shows in the country for sporting goods, and we had a pretty big sporting good business going. And I arrived there in the baggage claim, and way down the other end was Doug Otto, and I instantly got goosebumps again. And you've heard me talk about goosebumps, To me, like I'm a very spiritual person, and to me, that's my inner being, my little spirit inside me telling me, Brian, you're on the right track. And every time I felt goosebumps in that way, I used to sort of think it's weird, but now I just accept that that's my little helper telling me, yep, go for it, you're on the right track. So anyway, I walked down the concourse at the baggage claim, and Doug saw me, and we smiled and high-fived each other. And I said, Doug, if ever we're going to get these businesses together, because, our business died every summer, his business died every winter, and it was a perfect match. And he'd tried to approach me before about buying it, but I used to, joke, hey, Doug, you can't afford me, But since he'd gone public and he had all this cash, it was like, it was a good way for me to go public without having to go public. I just cashed out. And which was fantastic for me because I am a real entrepreneur. I love starting businesses. I hate being in big companies. I can't, if I have to sit in a committee meeting deciding on what product and what color to do, and you've got 15 people who all want to get their say in, and then you end up, instead of having either brown or black, you end up with this horrible color in the middle because everybody compromises, and I just can't stand that. So it was perfect timing for me to cash out, and the company was 15 million in orders, so I felt like I'd taken it as far as I could go.
Yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense right there. I love the understanding how you each complemented one another and being able to solve the respective others' problems at that particular moment in time. That's a very useful skill. So since, all of these things, I guess one of the really interesting questions that I would want to know is why take the time to document this in a book? Tell us about it.
Well, I love I love entrepreneurs, and this is my way to give back. And I mentioned those people coming up to me after I get off stage, and each one that tells me that I've helped them is just like, that's more than money. I can't explain it, but it means more to me than money. And I just want entrepreneurs. Like there's like so many people that I meet that go, oh yeah, I've got this idea, but I don't know how to get a business license. And I go, give me a break. I've never had a business license, you know, and they get held up by such stupid reasons, the stupid fears. And really it's just procrastination. And so my book is like a wake-up call for entrepreneurs, and it's a great roadmap for those who have already started and are going through the blues of that infancy or toddling stages. And and on top of that, it's full of my philosophy and stories, and it's just a really, really good read.
Nice. Now, what would you say to that person, or persons for that matter, who are thinking for the first time, I got an idea. I think it has legs. I'm not sure, but I want to start, but I'm a little afraid. What would you say to that person who's thinking about putting on their superhero outfit for the very first time in their life and actually taking on other people's problems?
Okay. First of all, if they've already employed, don't quit your job. Okay, begin your business, right? Begin it at night, on the weekends, I don't care when, lunch hours. Begin your business and keep your old job, because it's such a comfort to know that you can pay the rent every month. Whereas I jumped into this just 100%, and I had like a little bit of money from a house that I'd sold when I came to America. So I didn't bother getting a job, but I was forced to have to stay alive. So the first thing is stay alive. Start your business, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. You don't have to know where you're going when you start, because it'll just evolve. And the other thing I'd say is that the best piece of advice I got before I found UGGs, before I even came to America, I had a buddy who had a really successful small boat building business, and he always seemed to be in control of things. And I said, Rich, how do you know what to do with your life? And he came back and said, Brian, find out what it is you can do better than anybody else and do it. Because if you are the best, money will chase you, and you'll enjoy what you're doing and be happy. And the reason why you don't have to know where you're going is that as you move forward, as each step you take, you'll say, oh my God, I could have done it this way, or it would have been better had I done it that way. And that's how you grow. You never, it's like not a linear small to large. It's like you cruise along flat and you hit an obstacle, like a plateau. You have to climb up over that obstacle, and then you're cruising along flat on the next level, and you'll hit another obstacle. And when you get over that one, you're cruising along at a higher level. And before you know it, you'll be way, way, way up there. But it's never been a straight run. It's always been little things that jolt you up into the next level. And it has to be an obstacle, or else there's no growth.
Indeed. Now, for those of us who want to hear more from you, or find your book, or understand what you are up to next, what's the best way for us to get in contact with you?
Okay, through my website, or my email address. It's the website is briansmithspeaker.com with a BRI, and my email is brian@briansmithspeaker.com, and that way you can check out my book page if you want to buy a book. That links to Amazon, or if you are looking for speaking, if you want me to come and speak to your group, I'd love to do that. And then there's also a little coaching component to it if somebody's stuck and needs to sort of get a little nudge over some problems, or wants to start out, then I do have a coaching program as well.
Excellent, sir. Well, I do want to say I definitely appreciate you taking the time to invest with us here today at the Cashflow Diary audience.
Great. Well, I hope I've been an inspiration to your audience.
I do believe you have, sir. Thank you very much.
Great. My pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is? It is time for you to move at the speed of instruction. So what does that mean today? That probably means go pick up a copy of The Birth of a Brand, because you know what? I've learned some things today, and I know this. You may have a business right now, as he said, in its infancy, toddling along. Don't quit. Keep pushing forward. You will continue to mature and grow up. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Until next time.